What's up everyone, Zero here. So I recorded this video and I got some feedback about it. So I wanted to redo it. I want to make some shorter videos about crafting. So this way you don't have to watch a 40-minute video on just crafting one item. You can just watch these little videos and hopefully I'll be able to take you from the basics to some more complex concepts in crafting. If this video helps you at all, please consider subscribing to the channel because that really helps me out. Let's get into it. Items come in three types. You have armor, weapons, and jewelry. The weapons will obviously just be things like the wands, scepters, axes. Your armor would be your gloves, boots, body armor, helmet. Jewelry is your rings, your amulets, and your belt. You also have jewels, which go in your jewel slot in your passive tree. And then you have cluster jewels, which go in these little end slots here in the passive tree. You also have abyssal jewels, which go into abyssal sockets. However, they can also be socketed into the slots on your passive tree that the regular jewels can go in as well. If you hover over any item and hit Alt and hold it down, it will show you if it's a prefix, a suffix, or an implicit. For the weapons and the jewelry, they will always have an implicit on them. So the implicit modifier is the modifier that's right under the requires level. No matter what you do to this item, the implicit will not change. Unless you use a Veil Orb, but we'll get into that later because that corrupts an item unpredictably. Same goes with weapons. For the armor, sometimes they come with an implicit, like on these spike gloves, and sometimes they don't. There are four types of rarities. There's normal, which can just have an implicit modifier. There's magic, which can have one prefix and one suffix. And then there's rare, which can actually have three prefixes and three suffixes. Obviously, on a rare item, you're not guaranteed 3 and 3, but it can roll up to that. And that's across the board. That's for weapons, jewelry, and armor. For jewels, it's a little bit different. A normal jewel will have no modifiers on it. A normal cluster jewel will just have the implicits at the top. I just call them implicits. They might be called something else, but the adds 8 passives, 2 passive skills, or jewel sockets, those never change. So they're just like implicits. A magic jewel can also have one prefix and one suffix. Same with a cluster. However, a rare can only have 2 prefixes and 2 suffixes. You can get implicit modifiers on jewels, but most of the time they are corrupted. When you're just starting out in the game, you just want to focus on things like resistances, max life. Once you get towards the end of the campaign, you can focus on things like chaos resistance, spell suppression. You don't run into too much chaos damage during the campaign, so you don't really have to worry about that. On armor, the stat requirement is going to dictate which stats are actually on the item. So for instance, strength and intelligence is going to be armor and energy shield. So it's strength for armor, dex for evasion, and int for energy shield. On every item above the stat requirement, you're going to see item level. Now, item level is going to determine which stats can actually roll on the item. For instance, certain modifiers can only roll at higher levels. So when you get into some more complex crafting, there's actually a way to deterministically improve your odds to get certain modifiers. I will show you on Craft of Exile later on in the video how you can actually look at this. A very basic currency that you're going to be using. So the armor scrapped is going to improve the quality of an armor. And what this is going to do is it's going to raise the main stats that are on the item. So like for instance, the armor and the energy shield. On the weapons, you're going to use the blacksmith's whetstone to improve the quality, and this is going to raise the base damage on the weapon. There are ways to get over 20 quality, but if you're just using these, 20 quality is the max. For jewelry, to improve the quality, you're going to use catalysts, and these drop from Ultimatum. The cool thing about the jewelry is you can actually deterministically improve certain modifiers on the item. For instance, prismatic catalyst will raise resistances, intrinsic catalyst will raise attribute modifiers, and so on and so forth. An orb of scouring is going to take any item that's not corrupted and return it to a normal item. An orb of transmutation is going to take any normal item and turn it into a magic item. A regal orb is going to take any magic item and turn it into a rare item. An Orb of Alteration is going to change the stats on a magic item. The Orb of Alchemy is going to take a normal item and change it into a rare item. The Orb of Binding is going to take a normal item and turn it into a rare item with 4 sockets. So these are very good when you're very first going through the campaign, because you're going to need sockets. You're going to feel a little bit of that pressure to get your skills in there and your support gems. So it's a very good currency to get very early on because it's going to help relieve some of that socket pressure. If it can only have 3 sockets, it'll just roll up to the max. An Orb of Annulment is going to remove 1 stat, prefix, or suffix randomly. An Exalted Orb is going to add a random prefix or a suffix to an item. A Chaos Orb is going to re-roll a rare item. A Divine Orb, it's going to change the modifiers. It's going to re-roll the modifiers within their specific tiers. So for instance, if you have tier 7 fire resistance and you use a Divine Orb, it's going to roll within that 12 to 17 range. So it's not going to raise it or lower it, but it will roll within that range. You can use those when you're doing some higher end crafts, when you want to perfect an item. That's when you want to use that. If you're playing in Trade League, you want to save your Chaos Orbs and your Divine Orbs because those are going to be your currency when you're trading. The Divine Orbs obviously going to be a lot more rare than the Chaos, but that's how you're going to first start to acquire your items. If you're playing in SSF, you're going to want to hold on to those because when you're doing your higher end crafts, you're going to need them. There's also a Chance Orb, which can roll a normal item into a random rarity, which can also make it a unique. It's rare that that happens. So when you get a specific item base and it's the same base as a unique item that you're looking for, you can roll those on that base item and it has a chance to turn it into that unique item that you're actually looking for. When you complete Dweller of the Deep, it's the very first quest that gives you a skill point. You're going to have that monster is going to drop an essence. Now what an essence does is it's like a Chaos Orb. It's going to give you 1 guaranteed stat. The very low level essences upgrade normal items, and the very high end essences re-roll rares like Chaos Orbs. So for instance, this Whispering Essence of Greed guarantees max life on gloves. So I use that on this normal item, and it's going to give me a rare item with a guaranteed modifier on it. So when you're very first going through the campaign, you want to look for those because that's going to help you solve your resistance problems, your max life problems, and all of that. Craft of Exile is an amazing tool to use. It's craftofexile.com, and what this website allows you to do is run an emulator. So you can use all of the crafting currencies on an item to test out what kind of outcome that you might get when you try it in game. So it's very, very simple. For instance, those spiked gloves that I had, I can type in spiked gloves. I can put in item level 67, and it's going to allow me to scroll down, and I can see all of the modifiers that can roll on that specific base. Another cool thing that it does is if I want to pick a certain crafting technique that I want to use, let's say I want to use essences, and I want to roll increased armor on the gloves. I click on increased armor, I choose the tier that I want to roll. It's going to show here that tier 1 and 2 cannot roll on items that are below level 72, so that'll be crossed out. You'll be able to tell right away what can and cannot roll. I click on this, I go up here to the top, and it's going to tell me that 23 essences on average, and I'll be able to get increased armor. And that's with a 64% confidence rating. Obviously, if it said 3,500 essences, maybe I'd want to try a different route to try to get that increased armor on there, but it's pretty simple. Another cool thing you can do on here is you can go on the emulator, you can create an item. Let's say I go gloves, and let's say I want strength and int gloves, and I can pick any base here that's strength and int. And I go on here, I pick item level 60, just for an example. I click here, and this is going to allow me to use those currencies that I showed you earlier. So like, let's say I wanted to hit it with an alchemy orb, hit it with an alchemy, it turns it into a rare. Now let's say I want to use the divine orb on it. I hit the divine orb, it's going to show you that they're going to roll within their tiers. We will get into some more complex crafting concepts later on in the video series, but I just wanted to give you a basic introduction So if you're brand new to the game, don't be intimidated. It's really not as complicated as it seems. There are some very complicated crafts. Hopefully by the end of this video series, I'll be able to help you understand it a little bit more. And that's it. So if this video helped you at all, please consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps me out. And stay tuned for the next one, all right? See you guys next time. Peace.